It was always there, the pillow, a single firm line of cotton and silence between her and the man she'd married. Y or N placed it without drama, without words, just as she always did, deliberate and final. On the surface, it looked innocent, an awkward couple's way of managing a bed too big and a marriage too unfamiliar. But they both knew the truth. That pillow was not just fabric, it was a boundary, a protest, a barricade between her heart and his empire. And Jungkook never touched it. Not for weeks. Not once. He slept on his side, back turned, muscles tight beneath his dress shirt, which he never changed out of. She pretended not to notice the gun under his pillow, the late-night calls he answered in code, the blood she once found on his cuff when she picked up his jacket from the floor. He was handsome, impossibly so, cold brew eyes, tattooed hands, a jawline that could cut through bone and silence alike. But he wasn't hers. He wasn't anyone's. The marriage was arranged. Her father brokered the deal to keep her safe after threats had been made. Old rivals, gang whispers, words like protection and alliances had been thrown around like confetti. Jungkook is the safest man in Seoul, her father had said. She didn't know whether that was a comfort or a warning. They'd been married for 42 days, not that she was counting. In that time, Jungkook had spoken maybe 50 words directly to her. And yet, somehow, he managed to control every aspect of her life, her schedule, her driver, her clothes, handpicked and delivered in black garment bags each morning. She lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city like a throne. Everything smelled like leather, rain, and him, and yet she felt like a guest in her own life. Tonight, she wore one of the silk nightgowns he'd left on the bed, an icy blue that clung to her skin like memory. She slid under the sheets, turned her back to him, and reached for the pillow. But her hand froze, because he was already awake, sitting up, watching her. The low city light filtered in through the window, casting gold across his cheekbones. His tie was gone, shirt half unbuttoned, tattooed forearm resting on his bent knee. She met his eyes, finally, and they weren't cold. They were furious. "What happened tonight?" he asked, voice low and quiet. She blinked. "At dinner?" He didn't nod. He didn't need to. YN knew what he meant. It had happened after dessert, just before the pianist started playing. Mina, the spoiled daughter of a foreign arms broker, had leaned over the table with a sneer and said, "Poor YN, married to the Mafia's accountant. How tragic." And the others had laughed. Jungkook hadn't reacted. Not then. He hadn't even looked up from his wine. But he remembered. "They disrespected you," he said now. YN sat up, pulling the sheets to her chest. "They disrespect everyone. It's what they do. They did it to you." "So what?" she snapped, suddenly defensive. "You going to kill them all because they made a joke?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said it all. Her throat tightened. "You're not a god, Jungkook. You can't control how people think. But I can control what they regret." The pillow still lay between them, untouched, waiting. YN let out a long breath and reached for it again. But Jungkook's hand moved, fast, precise, and for the first time, he grabbed it. He held it up, stared at it, then flung it across the room. It hit the floor with a heavy thump. She stared at him, stunned. "You think that protects you?" he asked, his voice low like distant thunder. "This pillow? This gap between us? I think it keeps me sane." He shifted closer. The space between them disappeared in inches, then centimeters, then heartbeats. "You're mine," he said. "Legally, publicly, privately." Y or N's lips parted. "That doesn't mean you own my sleep." "No," he whispered, "but I own the silence you've been hiding behind." He reached out, not rough, not forceful, just fingers brushing her collarbone, slow, reverent, intense. "I've let you place that pillow every night," he said. "Let you pretend this marriage is just paper. Let you act like I don't see the way you flinch when I walk in." She swallowed. "Because you terrify me." "Good," he said, voice deepening. "I should." She shook her head. "That's not how love works." "We're not in love," he reminded her. "This is a contract." "Then why are you angry when someone mocks me?" He paused, and for the first time, his armor cracked. "Because even if this marriage is fake," he said, "your pain isn't." She stared at him, long and hard. Something in her chest shifted. Not melted, not yet, but shifted. "Jungkook?" she whispered. "Why do you sleep so far away?" His eyes darkened. "Because if I don't," he said, voice dropping to a growl, "I'll forget the terms. I'll forget we're strangers. And I'll remind you in ways you're not ready for." The air between them snapped tight. Y or N's breath caught. And for a second, just one, she wondered what it would be like to forget. To erase the pillow. To let him show her what a man like him did with someone who defied him. He moved away, back to his side, back to the cold, and said only one thing before turning off the light. "Don't put that pillow back tomorrow night. I won't be kind twice." N didn't place the pillow the next night. Not because she wanted to give in, not because she had forgiven the way he spoke like a king commanding silence, but because her hands trembled too much to hold it. The day had been a disaster. It started with a breakfast she barely touched, a missed call from her cousin in Busan, and a wardrobe she didn't recognize. Jungkook's people had delivered a dress. Long, dark green velvet, fitted like second skin, expensive, commanding. The kind of thing women wore when they were expected to be seen. "Where are we going?" she had asked the moment he stepped into the room that afternoon. He looked up from his phone just once. "A fundraiser." "For what?" "For people I pretend to care about, Ibrahim." Plied. She should have refused, should have said no, should have curled back into the bed and pulled the covers over her head. But something in her, pride, bitterness, plain rage, made her slip into that dress and walk beside him like she wasn't a prisoner in pearls. The event was held at the Seraphine Hotel, a place so gilded it felt like walking through champagne. Everyone who mattered was there, people who moved stocks with a sentence, and silenced scandals with a smirk. Jungkook was calm, of course. He wore a black suit that fit like armor, hair pushed back, cold eyes, easy smirk. The devil dressed like a Forbes cover. He didn't speak much, just nodded, just placed his hand low on her back when people approached, a silent reminder that she wasn't just an ornament. She was owned. That's when Mina reappeared, like poison in perfume. She walked up to YN with a faux smile, a clutch, the size of a secret in her hand, and a voice dipped in champagne and venom. "YN," she said sweetly, "you look different." Y or N blinked. "It's the lighting." Mina tilted her head. "No, it's the dress. Or maybe the confidence. It's nice, even if it's borrowed." Y or N froze. Mina continued, glancing at Jungkook across the room. "I suppose when your husband funds half your closet, you start standing straighter." YN's hands clenched at her sides. Then Mina leaned in closer, dropping her voice. "But tell me, do you get to keep him at night? Or just the headlines in the morning?" The wine glass in YN's hand didn't shatter, but her resolve almost did. She turned, ready to walk away. But someone beat her to it. Jungkook. He had moved so silently, so fast, she didn't even realize he'd heard. But now he stood beside her, hand on her waist, eyes locked on Mina with a chill that froze time. "Ms. Park," he said, voice like a blade drawn in slow motion. "Still mistaking your mouth for power, I see." Mina paled. "You were just disrespecting my wife," he interrupted. The word wife hit harder than the glare. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. But Mina's clutch shook in her hand. Jungkook leaned in, eyes never leaving hers. If you ever speak to her again, I'll make sure your father's next deal is signed in ashes. The rest of the event blurred. Jungkook didn't touch her again after that, didn't speak. But the message had been sent. He wasn't quiet because he didn't care. He was quiet because he knew exactly when to strike. And his silence? It was deadly. They didn't talk on the drive home. The silence between them wasn't cold now. It was simmering, boiling under the surface. Jungkook sat with one hand on the armrest, jaw tense. YN stared out the window, replaying the scene like a movie. When they stepped into the penthouse, she expected him to vanish into his office like always. Instead, he followed her into the bedroom. She turned to him, unsure, pulse racing. He stopped just a foot away, eyes dark. You didn't say anything to her, he said quietly. She wouldn't have listened. You should have said something anyway. Why? She snapped, voice rising. So she could laugh harder? So she could see that, even when I scream, I sound like a doll in your cage? Jungkook stepped forward. You think I enjoy this? I don't know what you enjoy, she said. You don't let me see anything but control. He looked at her for a long time, and then, his voice low, I enjoy it when you're quiet. That stung, harder than it should have. Of course you do, she muttered, turning away. Makes it easier to ignore me. I enjoy it when you breathe like this, he said, stepping behind her now, fingers ghosting her spine. She froze. When your back arches just enough to remind me that you still haven't run, he whispered. She turned to face him. You enjoy dominance, Jungkook. That's all this is. His eyes met hers. Calm, deep, unreadable. No, he said, voice barely a breath. I enjoy winning, and you, YN, are the only thing I've ever wanted to win, but never crushed. He walked away then, left her standing in the middle of the bedroom like he hadn't just shattered her with softness. The pillow sat on the bed. She stared at it for a long time. Then, without thinking, she placed it gently between them again. Later that night, he walked in. And this time, he didn't toss it. He slid it aside. Slow, calm, not asking, deciding. Then he lay down, not touching her, but closer than ever before. His breath steady, his voice low. Next time she mocks you, you won't need to speak. Why? She whispered into the dark. He didn't answer for a long moment. Then, because I'll already be at her throat. The problem with sleeping closer was that you woke up feeling things. YN blinked against the morning light as the scent of sandalwood and danger washed over her, Jungkook's scent. He wasn't touching her, but his presence was impossible to ignore. Just inches from her shoulder, facing her now. Eyes closed, jaw relaxed, chest rising steadily. It was the first time she'd ever seen him peaceful, and for a split second, she hated him a little less. Then reality set in. He'd touched the pillow. And worse, he'd removed it, like it never mattered. She sat up quickly, pulse thrumming. The space between them was too close, too personal, too unspoken. She slipped out of bed quietly and made her way to the ensuite bathroom, locking the door behind her. The water from the sink ran cold, but it didn't numb her thoughts. What was she doing? One act of protection, one flash of rage from Jungkook, and she was letting him melt the very wall she'd built? The pillow had been her only form of control, and now it lay useless on the floor. She shouldn't have allowed him to cross that line. She should have slapped him, screamed, or maybe begged him not to be so gentle in his threats. By mid-afternoon, she was dressed and out. Jungkook had left, as he always did, before she woke. No note, no message, just his scent on the sheets and silence in the air. Today, she needed air. She called her driver and asked to go somewhere quiet, somewhere far from the penthouse and the stairs. She chose the Han River, but someone else chose her. She was walking along the river path, dressed in a simple beige coat and flats, when it happened. A man she didn't recognize, tall, scarred, with too much confidence in his stride, fell into step beside her. "Mrs. John," he said casually. She froze mid-step. "I don't believe we've met," she said flatly, heart racing. "We haven't," he replied. "But I know your husband. Everyone claims they do." He smiled. "True, but not everyone knows how many people he's buried to protect his secrets." She turned to walk away. He stepped in front of her. Too close, too fast. "Tell him something for me," the man said, voice tightening. "Tell him the warning shots are over. Next time it's your blood." The gun wasn't drawn. The words were. YN didn't run. She didn't scream. She just stared. And then, from behind them, a single gunshot rang out. The man collapsed instantly, groaning as blood bloomed across his thigh. A clean shot, non-lethal, deliberate. YN spun around to see who had fired. Black gloves, black coat, jet black Mercedes, Jungkook. He stepped out from behind the car door, lowering the pistol, eyes colder than death. The man on the ground whimpered. "You're too late, John!" Jungkook walked forward, kicked the man's gun out of reach, and pressed his boot gently to the bleeding thigh. "No," he said. "I'm exactly on time." YN stood frozen as Jungkook approached her. She expected a lecture, a command, a growl. But instead, he reached for her hands and held them between his gloved ones. "You okay?" he asked. She blinked. I think so." His jaw flexed. "I told them not to touch you." She shook her head. He just spoke. That was enough." They drove in silence for nearly an hour. She didn't ask how he found her. She knew the truth. Jungkook never lost track of anything he owned. When they reached the penthouse, he handed her a drink before saying anything. Then, softly, "No more walks without security. Ever." She nodded, still shaken. "You're not furniture, YN," he said. "You're a message." "To who?" "To everyone who thinks I have weaknesses." That night she didn't place the pillow. She didn't look at him. But when he walked in and found her awake, she finally spoke. "You didn't have to shoot him." Jungkook stepped into the room, loosening his collar. "Yes, I did." "You could have let him go, arrested, scared off." He shook his head. "People like that don't respond to mercy. They interpret it as permission." She turned to face him. "Then what am I supposed to be, Jungkook? The soft exception in your hard world?" He crossed the room slowly. "You're supposed to survive." She blinked. "And what are you?" He leaned in close, his voice a whisper at her lips. "I'm the reason you will." This time, when he lay beside her, there was no pillow, no silence. Just a heavy breath between two people trying not to admit that fear had already turned into something else. And when he reached for her hand under the covers, she let him hold it. Not as a husband, but as the man who had warned the world, touch her and bleed. It wasn't love, not yet, but something inside YN had begun to smolder, something that crackled beneath the silence, something dangerous, something that sounded a lot like his name in her throat when no one else could hear it. She dreamt of fire that night, not burning, but breathing. Smoke curling around her like silk. A shadow leaning over her, lips brushing her neck, saying nothing, and yet somehow owning everything. When she awoke, her hand was already on his chest, flat, centered, over his heart. Jungkook was still asleep, shirtless for the first time, muscles relaxed, tattooed arm resting above his head, like he didn't live in a world that tried to kill him every day. For a brief moment, he didn't look like the Mafia king. He looked like a man. Just a man. And then his eyes opened, dark, sharp, immediately focused. But he didn't move her hand. "You were dreaming," he said, voice deep and rough with sleep. "So were you," she whispered. His gaze didn't waver. "About you." That stunned her. "You dream about me?" He didn't smirk, didn't tease, just answered, "Every night since the day we signed that damn contract." The air between them shifted, dense, heated, like a storm about to crack the sky. YN didn't pull her hand away. She left it there, on his chest, over the steady thud of something that wasn't supposed to care. And maybe that's why he rolled toward her, slowly, like gravity had decided it for him. His hand came up, resting just beside her cheek. "I scare you," he said. She nodded. "And yet," his thumb brushed the edge of her mouth, "you let me in anyway. I think I'm more scared of what happens if I don't." She expected him to kiss her. He didn't. He leaned in close enough to make her heart tremble, and then whispered, "You smell like surrender." And then he got up. The day passed in strange tension. They had brunch in silence. Jungkook read through encrypted reports. YN stared at her eggs, unsure what to do with the image of him shirtless and soft and hers. Later, she was summoned to his office. He was sitting behind a glass desk. Black shirt buttoned back up, but the cuffs still rolled, showing skin that had held her in her dreams. He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat. Then quietly he placed a file between them. She stared at it. "What is this?" "Your sister's school, your cousin's new lease, your mother's hospital bill." She blinked. "How do you—" "I told you," he said, voice cool. "You're mine. That includes your worries." It should have felt like control, but instead it felt like protection, the kind no one had ever bothered offering her before. Quiet, without strings. She wanted to say thank you, but instead, she said, "What do you dream about?" Jungkook looked at her, and for the first time, he spoke without his usual restraint. "When you're not beside me, I dream you're dead." She flinched. His voice didn't rise, didn't tremble. "I see you on the ground, on a road, in a room I couldn't reach fast enough, with eyes wide open and breath long gone, and I wake up gasping." Silence. Y or N swallowed hard. "Why?" "Because they know what you are to me," he said. "And one day, they'll try to use it." That night she didn't wait for him to come to bed. She was already there when he walked in, sitting cross-legged, wearing one of his shirts, pillow nowhere in sight. Jungkook paused in the doorway. "You're inviting the wolf to the door," he murmured. "No," she said. "I'm finally realizing he was guarding it all along." He approached slowly, eyes locked on hers, unbuttoning his cuffs as he moved. And then he sat beside her, not over her, not claiming, just there. "I won't touch you unless you say so," he said. "Not because I'm kind, but because I know once I start, I won't stop." She met his gaze. "Then start." He didn't pounce. He breathed her in, one hand behind her neck, one hand gripping her waist, mouth brushing hers like a promise he wasn't ready to speak out loud. And when they finally kissed, it wasn't soft. It was fire wrapped in control, a slow burn that licked at skin and memory alike. He kissed her like a man who had spent nights worshipping her from afar, like someone who had waited long enough, like this was the only kiss the world would ever allow them. And when his hand slid up her thigh, she gasped, not from fear, from surrender, because she finally understood. This was his version of love. She had kissed the Mafia king and woken up alive, more than alive, wanted. YN lay in bed the next morning longer than usual, unsure if she was more afraid of the silence or the fact that it no longer frightened her. The pillow remained off the bed, a declaration, a risk. Last night had been a kiss, only a kiss, but it had shaken something loose, not just between them, but within her. She had tasted the edge of his control, the way he held back when every muscle in his body screamed not to. She had felt his breath tremble against her collarbone and knew, in that moment, that she was the only thing in the world Jungkook feared to break, and it made her bolder. By noon, she wandered into his office, something she'd never done without invitation before. He looked up, only briefly, and raised a brow. "You're up late." "You kept me up late?" That earned a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "You complaining?" "Not exactly." She stepped closer. His office smelled like cedar, expensive ink, and him. A heavy masculine scent that lingered on everything he touched. The desk, the leather chair, her lips. "I have a question," she said, folding her arms. He leaned back in his chair. "Ask." "Was the kiss a one-time thing?" He tilted his head. "Is this your way of asking if I regret it?" She shrugged. "I'm asking if I should." Jungkook rose from his seat, deliberate, lethal in slow motion. He walked around the desk and stood in front of her, so close she had to tilt her chin to meet his eyes. "If I kiss you again," he murmured, "it won't be like that." Her pulse jumped. "It won't stop at the bed," he added, fingers brushing her wrist. "It won't end in silence." "Then what?" His mouth lowered to her ear. "It ends with you begging for it." She pulled away, not in fear but in survival. The line between control and craving was already fading, and she needed air before she lost herself completely. "I have to go meet Serena," she said suddenly, avoiding his gaze. He nodded once. "Take June with you." Her breath hitched. "Why?" "You're mine, which means you're also a target." She frowned. "You're making me a prisoner again." "I'm making sure you're not a headline." The meeting with Serena was tense. Ever since the Mina incident and the whispers that followed, Serena had been nervous. "I didn't know you'd be at the gala," Serena mumbled into her whine. "I live with him, Serena. Where else would I be?" There was no pillow that night, no barrier, no silence left untouched, only skin, breath, and the storm they had both been hiding from finally tearing through them like lightning in silk. YN had always imagined that if she ever gave in to Jungkook fully, it would be violent. Not cruel, but overwhelming. Sharp edges, angry hands, heat like war. She didn't expect tenderness, didn't expect him to kiss her collarbone with reverence, or pause when she gasped, asking softly if she was sure. But that's what he did. He moved like a man afraid the dream would end mid-kiss, like she might vanish if he took too much too fast, which was laughable, because she was the one unraveling, and he was the one pulling every thread. His mouth was everywhere, at her neck, between her breasts, tracing the hem of her nightgown like it was sacred scripture. Her hands trembled when they touched his bare chest, not from fear, from realization that this wasn't just about sex. It was about undoing. Undoing the version of her that had been so carefully trained to be silent. Undoing the walls between them, wordless and heavy. Undoing the lie that she could keep living in his shadow without wanting to burn in his light. He laid her down carefully, as if she was the only soft thing he'd ever been allowed to hold, and then he knelt, between her legs, on the floor, eyes locked on hers like a commandment. "If you say no," he whispered, "I'll stop." "I won't," she said, breathless. "I can't." His mouth met her thighs, and she forgot how to speak. The world narrowed to his hands on her hips, and the trail of fire he left behind with every slow, devastating kiss. When he finally pressed his mouth against her, warm, slow, possessive, she gasped so loud it echoed. "Jungkook." He didn't speak. He worshipped. Every sigh she gave, every desperate plea, every trembling pull of his hair, only made him hungrier, more focused. Like he'd waited his whole life to learn her. Like she was the only language he wanted to speak again. When she finally came apart, fists tight in the sheets, chest arching, she thought she might sob. But all that came out was his name, whispered, broken, real. He rose slowly, mouth damp, expression feral, and then he kissed her again, like she wasn't undone, like he was. They didn't speak for a long time, just laid there entangled. His hand on her bare stomach, her head resting over the heartbeat she once feared. "I should have burned the pillow the first night," he said, voice hoarse. She smiled, weakly. "Would have set the bed on fire." Maybe it needed to burn. Later, she traced a line down his chest with her finger. "You said you weren't the man I needed," she whispered. "But maybe I wasn't the woman you wanted either." He caught her hand gently. "I didn't want a woman," he said. "I wanted peace." She looked up at him. "And now?" He kissed her palm. "Now, I want you." But peace doesn't last long in their world. At 4:27 a.m., his phone rang. He didn't groan, didn't roll over, just sat up instantly, muscles tense, eyes sharp, Y or N stirred beside him. "What is it?" He glanced at the screen, and his voice, cold now, said, "They took someone. They took her cousin, the one in Busan." YN didn't even know until Jungkook said it aloud, phone pressed to his ear, jaw clenched, shirt halfway buttoned at 4:30 a.m. "It's a message," he growled. "To you?" "No," he said darkly. "To you, through me." It had been building, the warning at the river, the man Jungkook shot, the whispers from foreign syndicates who didn't like the balance of power shifting into YN's name. She wasn't just the wife now. She was leverage. She was bloodline. They took her cousin from outside her apartment. Middle of the night. No cameras, no ransom note. Just one text message sent to Jungkook's encrypted line. "Your queen built a throne. We'll burn her kingdom one relative at a time." Jungkook stared at it for exactly 2 seconds, then destroyed the burner phone and picked up the Glock on the nightstand. YN was still in her robe, heart pounding, arms crossed tight across her chest. "You're going after them. I'm bringing her back. You're bringing a war." He turned to her. "It was already a war the moment you let me touch you." She swallowed hard. "Let me come with you." "No. I won't stay behind." "You will. I can help." His eyes flared. "They know your scent, YN. You walk in that room, they'll aim first. Ask questions later." "I'm not a weapon," she said. "No," he replied softly. "You're the reason I haven't used all of mine yet." She stayed in the safe house, not their penthouse, not anywhere trackable. It was underground, literal. 3 stories beneath a bookstore in Mapo-gu, guarded by men who only answered to Jungkook and didn't speak unless spoken to. Y or N paced for hours. Checked the burner phone, checked the clock. Waited. And when she couldn't take the silence anymore, she slept. For maybe 10 minutes. Until the door slammed open. It wasn't Jungkook. It was a man in a ski mask. Gun raised. Her heart dropped. She didn't scream, didn't run, just slowly raised her hands. "I'm not armed," he chuckled. "Oh, sweetheart, you are." With his name, he stepped forward, lifted the gun, pressed it right against her chest. "Message," he said. "Straight from Osaka. No wife. No peace." Her breath caught, and then the bullet never came, because Jungkook had already pulled the trigger, from behind him. The man dropped instantly, shot clean through the shoulder. YN gasped, stumbling backward as Jungkook stormed forward, kicked the gun away, grabbed the man by the collar, and slammed him against the wall. "I warned you," Jungkook snarled. The man bled and spit, laughing. "She was next," he wheezed. Jungkook didn't shoot again. He twisted the man's wrist so violently it cracked, then turned to YN. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but tears brimmed in her eyes. "He put a gun on me." He crossed the room in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. Not rough, not protective, just desperate. "I should have never left you," he whispered. "I told you I wanted to come." "I thought I could keep you safe with distance," he said. but I should have known. I'm the only wall you have. Later, when the bodies were cleaned up and her cousin was safely recovered, tied to a chair but untouched, YN and Jungkook sat in the back of a blacked-out SUV. He was quiet. Too quiet. And then he turned to her. "You can still leave," he said. "What?" "I can disappear, end the marriage on paper, give you your life back." She stared at him. "You'd let me go?" His jaw flexed. "I'd rip myself in half if it meant you got to breathe without fear." She looked out the window. Then, back at him. "You want me to leave because I was threatened?" "No," he said softly. "I want you to leave because you were almost taken." She reached for his hand, held it tightly. "No more divides, remember?" He looked at her, and for the first time he looked afraid. "Then promise me," he said. "Promise you what?" "That if they come again—" His voice broke. "You'll run." "No," she said. "If they come again, I'll shoot first." That night, they returned to the penthouse. No guards, no panic. Just Jungkook and Y/N alone. He didn't touch her immediately. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands on his thighs, staring at the floor. "I saw you, with a gun to your chest, and I—" She knelt in front of him, placed her hands over his, and whispered, "You saved me." He pulled her into his lap, held her there, not like a lover, not like a possession, but like she was the last soft thing left in a world full of death. It started with a breath, a soft one. The kind you don't notice until you realize it's not yours. The kind you feel on the back of your neck at 3 a.m., when the room is silent and the man sleeping beside you is no longer sleeping. YN didn't open her eyes right away, but she knew Jungkook was watching her. "You're awake," she murmured, voice soft from sleep. "I've been awake," he said, his breath brushing her shoulder. Since I realized I couldn't live if someone ever touched you again." There were no walls between them now. No pillow, no secrets. Just bruises beneath the skin that would never fully fade. His from the battles he fought. Hers from the crown he placed on her head, made of iron and fire, not gold. She turned to face him. "You still want to send me away?" Jungkook stared at her for a long time. "No." "Then why do you keep saying you will?" He hesitated. "Because I've buried men for less than touching your hand. I've erased families for daring to threaten what's mine. And I know one day someone will try again." YN's voice was firm now. "Then let them." The final move came not with violence, but with a meeting, a peace negotiation. At least, that's what the Osaka Syndicate called it. But Jungkook knew better. "You don't have to come," he told her as she stepped into her heels. "I'm already there," she replied, sliding a bullet into the chamber of the gun she kept hidden in her purse. The meeting was held at an abandoned theater in Incheon. Neutral ground, 4 men from Osaka, 2 from Vladivostok, and Jungkook, in black, standing at the center like the storm they all feared. YN sat behind him, not in the shadows, but in the open, her presence a threat all on its own. "We want peace," said the head negotiator, voice low, eyes flitting to her. "Then why aim at her chest 2 nights ago?" Jungkook replied, coldly. "It was a mistake." He laughed, once, sharp, hollow. "Your people don't make mistakes, they make statements." "And what's yours?" Jungkook stepped forward. "Peace is not an option, it's a condition." "You don't get it until you bleed." He tossed something onto the table, a photo. Of the man who'd threatened YN, dead, mouth sewn shut, eyes missing. The room fell silent. YN didn't blink, she just folded her arms. When they left the theater, no one followed, because no one needed to. A new message had been delivered, loud and clear. The queen was not the weakness. She was the weapon. That night, back at the penthouse, Jungkook poured them both a drink. "Do you regret it, Imuza?" he asked. She looked out to the window, at the city, the empire, the silence that no longer felt cold. "Regret marrying you?" He nodded. She stepped toward him, pressed her lips to his jaw, his throat, his chest, then pulled back and said, "I regret not removing the pillow sooner." They didn't make love that night. They made truth, on the kitchen counter, on the cold marble floor, up against the window where the world couldn't see them, but would feel them for decades. There were no questions anymore, no hesitation, just the sound of her voice in his ear, whispering, "Yours," and his reply growled against her skin, "Always." 1 month later, a file arrived at their penthouse. No name, just a black envelope. Inside, a document, stamped, sealed, YN John, Joint Syndicate Command. It wasn't just a courtesy, it was power. Signed by every remaining family who now bent the knee. Jungkook looked at her, that unreadable fire back in his eyes. "You know what this means." She nodded. "We build," she said, "together." And on that same night, as they climbed into the same bed, no pillows, no boundaries, she rested her head on his chest and whispered, "You were never the villain, Jungkook. Just the weapon no one dared sharpen, until I touched you." He smiled into her hair. "You didn't sharpen me, baby. You armed me.